Even though the little light is green and not red, is that okay? So yeah, this, okay, and that, the little camera's light is green and not red, is that okay? There we go. That's good, I like the red. Good morning again, everybody, and thank you for staying and thank you for joining us online for this presentation. Katie Carpenter is here from Bethany Christian Services, and I've been including some information about them in our e-news bulletin and in our liturgy leaflet inserts the last couple of weeks, including today. So you have at least a little bit of background. I'm going to let Katie introduce herself and talk a little bit more about Bethany. I'll just say that we have been discerning a number of us about whether or not we as a parish could be collaborating with a couple of other congregations to help Bethany in their work with resettling refugees. So that's why we're here this morning, is to learn more about Bethany Christian Services and how they do this and the possibilities that are before us in that regard. Thanks again to Jane Underwood and Margot Boltman and Margie Mason and Linda McCroy. Did I name everybody? Good, I'm always scared of it. Anyway, for working on all of this and bringing us to this point. I'm very grateful for that. So, wow, there goes some snow. Anyway, I'm going to hand this over to Katie. Katie will do what Katie does, and then we'll have some time for questions.
Awesome. Well, let's see.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes, I hear you.
You do? Okay. All right, cool. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here. I know earlier this week I had a little bit of a question health-wise if I was going to be able to be here with COVID, and got that in the clear. And then, of course, weather right now is crazy too. Yes. So I was very pleasantly surprised to wake up this morning and see no more snow and that we were good, and grateful to be here today. And thank you for the welcome, inviting me in to share about this too. So yeah, as he mentioned, I'm Katie Carpenter and work for Bethany Christian Services in Grand Rapids. And what brings me here, of course, to Saugatuck and not Grand Rapids is we want to kind of expand and consider more and more what it might look like to resettle some of the folks who come through our Grand Rapids office, and also like along the lakeshore. So Holland, Muskegon, Grand Haven, anywhere along there. And so we absolutely utilize the partnership of community organizations, nonprofits, and churches like yourself. And so yeah, I'm the community engagement and co-sponsor developer, and I'll be talking a little bit more about what co-sponsor groups are during this presentation, and kind of what that might look like for you as a congregation, and if you partner with a couple of other churches as well to do this work, what that might look like for you. And I hope by the end of this that you will have a clearer picture of what all Bethany does, for one, and two, how you'd partner with that, with Bethany to resettle a family, and through what unique skills, get you thinking through what unique skills and capacity you might have to play a role within that group. And of course, I'll be available for questions and stuff after as well. So just to start, I don't want to make an assumption that everybody knows about Bethany and what all we do. And so just very briefly wanted to go through our 3 pillars of service. So our first pillar here is probably what Bethany's most known for, and that is serving vulnerable kids in the US. So we do that through our domestic foster care and also adoption programming, and also have some like pregnancy counseling services as well. And then our second tier of service here, not sure what just happened there, is where I come in, Refugee and Immigrant Services, and that includes both our adult and family programming, which is where I work in, and also our refugee foster care programming. So I'll have a slide on our foster care as well, in case you feel kind of specifically led to do that. But yeah, and lastly, I'll just keep sliding through these. The last tier of service is globally. So while we do serve in about 31 currently different states in the US, we also serve in about 10 different countries
around the world as well besides the US. And we do that through a variety of family empowerment and family preservation services. Historically, we had done international adoption, and now we're kind of moving towards wanting to help these different countries maybe even build up their own foster care and adoption system in their country, and just help as much as we can to set up a system where they can keep their families unified and together there. That's a big part of Bethany, and our motto is families together. So coming next into more the refugee side of things, something to note is there are over 82 million people displaced around the world. That number is growing all the time. When I first started 4 months ago, this presentation had around 70 or something, and I did a quick search and was like, wow, that is rapidly increasing all the time. And about a quarter of this number are folks who are actually considered refugees, which we'll look at the definition for that in a minute. But a greater number of this, about a third to half, are people considered internally displaced. So they've had to leave their situation, or not in a safe situation, but they're still in their country of origin. I also like to distinguish between migrants and refugees. A lot of times these words are kind of used interchangeably, but they are different. Migrants are people who choose to leave their situation, whereas refugees are people who have been forced to flee their situation. And if someone's going to be considered a refugee and be able to go through, it's the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees that determines someone's refugee status and helps them to be referred for resettlement to another country, then they need to meet this definition here. Particularly having a well-founded fear of persecution based on race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. So a little bit about life in a refugee camp as you maybe want to begin working with this population. Some things to note about that is that there's limited or no educational opportunities. There's little, if any, medical care. There's a ration card and system utilized for their food and other resources they get, even with the materials they get to build the hut or house that they're living in, as you can see behind here, is kind of like a ration that they are given. There's limited or no employment, little safety, no access to mental health care, which when you think about just the very nature of these folks, by definition of who they are, have experienced trauma. So that is definitely something that compounds all of this, along with this idea of warehousing, where we see 10,000 or more people living within a refugee camp. And you can imagine when you get that many people living in such a small space, that it just compounds a lot of issues and kind of hinders their human rights, ultimately. So I say all of that not just for the negative side of it, but also just to make sure it's clear these people are some of the most resourceful and resilient people that are on our planet, and are absolutely capable of facing any challenge they might have as they come here to the US, and being able to be resettled. And so just like to point that out as well. Also, if you were not aware, it's actually the president who determines how many refugees we allow into the country each year. And so I have a little graph here so you can see what that looks like. It's from 1980 to 2019 is where that dropped off, if you can't see that up here. And it's kind of interesting to note, as different administrations came in and set numbers, that it's gone up and down. Also interesting to note is that the Biden administration assigned 125,000 as the refugee cap for this coming year. And so that would be about right here. So one of the bigger spikes that we've had in a very long time, and it will be interesting to see how that impacts resettlement agencies around the country, such as Bethany. So kind of a little bit about how refugees get here. So I already mentioned the UNHCR, who determines someone's refugee status and helps them be referred for resettlement to another country. If that is determined to be the US, then we have, for example, maybe someone from a family from the Congo, and they have fled to Rwanda, a neighboring country, and have been staying at a refugee camp for 10, 20 plus years. A lot of these families have been staying, which I did not know personally before I started at Bethany, how long some of these families have been waiting. So they go there, they go through the UNHCR process, say, let's go to the US, and then they go through a plethora of different security and medical clearances. There's about 8 different US agencies that have their hands involved in this, and refugees are by far the most heavily vetted of any immigrant status that we have here in the US. And once they're cleared through that, they can be referred to one of 9 national resettlement agencies we have here in the US. And that includes CWS, or Church World Service. And that is who Bethany is an affiliate of. So Church World Service sends the case over to us and says, hey, are you able to take this family? We assure the case and say, yep, we're good to go, send them our way. And then they show up at the airport, which is what you can see here in this photo. Yeah, this is from a group a few years ago, actually through a university in Grand Rapids that was a co-sponsor for a family. And this is usually one of the favorite parts I've heard from co-sponsor groups of the whole ordeal, is just being able to meet them initially and give them a good welcome at the airport when they arrive. So finally getting into co-sponsorship and kind of what that is. So overall, that is where a community group, usually a core group of like 6 to 12 people, come together and they partner with Bethany to help resettle this family and help them achieve self-sufficiency. That is a 6-month commitment for a group to assist the family with that. And we'll go into some of the specifics of kind of what that looks like here. So we see this as like a public-private partnership. So even though Bethany is a nonprofit, we still get a lot of federal funding to do this resettlement work. So we're kind of the public side of that and assist the family with kind of finding and securing their housing. We also provide 90 days of case management for each family at minimum. We have some other programs that families might be involved in that are longer, but at very minimum, 90 days of case management. During that time, we are getting as much done for them as we can. That includes getting them enrolled for DHHS benefits. These folks qualify for things like Medicaid, cash assistance, food stamps, all of that. So get them enrolled along with their Social Security registration, get that taken care of. We also have an employment program, so every family gets partnered with an employment specialist that's helping them find a job. We also have English learning programs through Bethany that our families get connected with as well. We have a healing center, and that is our in-house kind of therapy and counseling services for folks who are survivors of torture specifically. Of course, we have other community connections as needed for other mental health resources, but that's just a Bethany in-house thing to know about. And then we also have a post-resettlement program. That's one of the programs I alluded to earlier when I say some people might get more than those 90 days of case management, and that can be accessed for up to 5 years from when someone arrives. And that's just the idea that 90 days is a lofty goal for every family to be set and on their own. So they could be enrolled in this program and have a case manager assisting them with some of those last things they need on that road to being self-sufficient. So we see Bethany as kind of doing more of like the logistical resource heavy lifting, and then we see the community group or the co-sponsor group on the side doing more of kind of the day-to-day heavy lifting and helping a family get acclimated to the area. You might do things like help with the housing setup, maybe gathering some items that the family will need when they move into that long-term housing and assisting with that move. And that might include other material needs that come up. Maybe that's a clothing need or helping them with initial groceries. They do have financial resources to help pay for groceries long term, and that's not on you guys to be paying for all of that, but maybe helping with the first couple grocery trips would be helpful, and some of those material needs that come up. Already showed about the airport arrival, giving them a good welcome. Friendship and social is probably the most important part of co-sponsorship. Bethany has a different relationship with the family because of the nature of how we're helping them, and we're not there all the time. So you guys really could become like the first friends that the family is making after they come to the US. Community connections, showing them where is that grocery store and how do you navigate that. You can pay for your groceries, but let's show you how this thing works so you know how to do that in the future. Or the thrift stores or the library, those things that we know about in our community, but everything's new to them, so they don't know about that yet. Transportation is a huge thing. Bethany does a lot of coordinating of different medical appointments. We're connecting them with the primary care doctor and the health department and different things like that. But we might let you guys know when that appointment is to see if you're able to assist with that transportation. English tutoring, so Bethany has that English learning program, but we do invite maybe if it's just even one person in the group who maybe you're a teacher, you've done ESL in the past, to help supplement that programming and do maybe some one-on-one tutoring with members of the family. We always invite that, and I can actually send curriculum too, depending on the English level of where the family is at. Sometimes you don't know that till they arrive and figure that out as you go, but we have some resources there. Educational liaison, a lot of times we actually have a partnership with the Refugee Education Center in Grand Rapids that helps our family get their kids enrolled for school. But we have had times where maybe we're really busy or you guys just have a great idea and feel comfortable with the school system, and maybe you help the family get their kids enrolled in school. Not a requirement, but just one thing that might come up. And then budget mentoring. A lot of times this is the first time for a family that they're having regular income come in once they get a job and regular bills coming out. And that can be a very difficult process in the beginning to kind of make sure those match up and be making kind of financial decisions that are sustainable given what they are, the money that they have. So assisting them with that is a huge help. Of all those practical things I just mentioned, the main things you actually need to be in a co-sponsor group are right here. So hospitality and a welcoming heart. Flexibility, a lot of things may not come out to be what you thought it might be, the relationship, the experience, some things may be different. Some families decide to move, like you just never know. And so being flexible and holding expectations with open hands is important as you enter into this. Having a sense of humor is important. There will be, there's probably going to be some type of language barrier, whether it's a significant level or not. And so, yeah, just having a sense of humor when those barriers come up is really important. And I can provide, as needed, some resources for kind of translation and interpretation. Bethany does have those provided for appointments and things that we coordinate, but in your day-to-day going to visit the family, that is not something we provide. And so I want to make sure that you do have some resources if that time comes. But yeah, just being flexible, learning as you go, giving yourself, your group grace, giving Bethany grace, and giving the family grace as they learn a lot is important. Openness to other cultures and customs. God has made so many different people and cultures, and they're all beautiful, and I think that we miss out when we don't engage. And patience, which I kind of just alluded to also, is important. I think you guys are working with one family, but a Bethany case manager most likely has 30 plus families on their caseload. And so patience with Bethany is important, and again with the family as they learn things, and with your group as you take time to coordinate things. And then finally, it's just the ability to show the love of Christ to a family that's overwhelmed with a new culture and language. Some reminders are that the primary role of you as a group is to be their friend. Bethany really does a lot of the heavy lifting and has those partnerships to do a lot of those other bigger things. Keep in touch with the case manager. You're spending more time with the family if you do this than the case manager is, so they value insights and things you learn while you're with the family and can absolutely answer questions you have, but they will reach out to you as a group too if needs come up for a family. We also have a Friends of Refugees support group that the person in my position before started, which is awesome. And basically, whoever the leader of the group is gets added to an email list, and I send out reminders for when this Friends of Refugees meeting is happening. Usually it happens every other month on the 4th of the month, so for group on the 4th. And it's a space for past co-sponsor groups, and also if you're doing it now or thinking about doing it, to come together and you can ask questions, share stories from your experience, and connect with other people, and share names and contact info so you can connect with the other people in the Holland area doing this work as well. Looking at definitions of success, that kind of alludes to just the flexibility piece and what we define as successfully integrating to the US, and our lives here may look different for someone from a different culture who's coming here. So keep that in mind, and be open to whatever the relationship ends up being with the family. Some people, they get really close and that relationship continues. Other times, you are called to just do those transportation requests and maybe help bring them food, and that's all it turns into. And so you really do need to be flexible and celebrate all the different accomplishments that you see within the family, big or small, on their way to being self-sufficient. So now a little bit about what's going on at Bethany. As you can probably assume, it's been a very busy time. We saw everything that happened in August in Afghanistan. As resettlement agencies, we're asking probably some of the same questions you were. What does this mean for the U.S.? And what does it mean for resettlement agencies? And very quickly, we were told we were going to play a significant role, that there would be tens of thousands of these people coming in such a short time after they fled from Afghanistan, that we would be called on to resettle. So Bethany in Grand Rapids has said that our capacity was to resettle 250 individuals total. That's a combination of single folks, but also families. We've seen so far about 2/3 of that number come. So we've had over 180 people coming so far, and expect the rest to be coming through the end of January. It's been wonderful. Pretty much almost all of our families have been able to have a co-sponsor, which is wonderful. There's been amazing community response, and I'm so grateful for that. Most of these families have been younger families, and most of them have been smaller as well. We've seen anywhere from just a couple all the way up to a family of 8 with 6 kids. So been kind of a range there too, but that's a little of what's going on there. You may not feel called to join in on this group, but there are some other ways that you could get involved that I wanted to mention as well. So we are making welcome baskets, both a kitchen and cleaning and also bathroom hygiene welcome basket for each of our families to get them through that first week or so. What do you need for those things? And also making sure we have winter gear. So we've actually created an Amazon wish list. And if you haven't heard about that yet, how you get to it is just bethany.org/Afghanistan. So it's just bethany.org/Afghanistan, and we have all of our different wish lists on that webpage. So you can find the Grand Rapids, Holland, Muskegon wish list, and you can actually see on there what is the most needed items or highest priority items if you do decide to set aside a certain amount of money to order some things there. So that would be a great way to get involved. Also gift cards. I can't say how many times we've been able to use gift cards to get last minute things like car seats for a family, or just other things like a new pair of shoes or clothes for the family that they need, but we don't want it eating away at the limited money that they are given. And so Visa, Walmart, Meijer, Target would be awesome. Also looking at housing, that has been a tricky piece, and so I always like to throw out in my presentations, if you have connections to landlords that might be willing to work with Bethany and rent out a house to a refugee family. We value those leads, and that's kind of how we find a lot of our housing opportunities, and their willingness to meet Bethany and the family where they're at with an affordable amount would be amazing. So just want to throw that out there, and you can always let me know if you do have any connections or have a conversation with someone you know that might want to work with Bethany. I don't do that per se, so I can pass that along to, we do have a housing and donation coordinator. But also want to mention volunteering too. If you go to that bethany.org/Afghanistan page as well, there's a space where, yeah, again, maybe you're not part of this group, but you do feel led to be on call for maybe a family in Holland, if their co-sponsor group or maybe an individual's come to Holland and they need transport to an appointment or something. And maybe that's helping with English tutoring. You can actually find a form right on that bethany.org/Afghanistan page and fill out what you might specifically feel led to volunteer with. So that would be a great way to get involved. And then also like to mention our refugee foster care programming. So everything that I've talked about is more related to our adult and family programming. But I do know some people in the past or currently have felt led to do foster care, whether domestically or refugee. And so just like to mention, we do have a variety of options, whether that's very short-term placements or longer-term placements in our different foster care programs. And so if that's ever something that you feel led to, let me know, and I can get you the information you need to get connected with my colleague. It's Claire Hopkins, who does our recruiting and informational sessions for refugee foster care, and would love to make sure you have the info you need to thoughtfully and prayerfully consider if that's what you should do. So to close, why would you do this? Is to show the love of Jesus first and foremost. It expands our world, as I mentioned earlier, of all that God's created. We've all been given resources and been blessed, whether that's with time, energy, money. So this is a space to be able to give of that. And shows us there's diversity and great opportunities for cross-culture encounters right here. You don't have to sign up to do a short-term mission trip or be a long-term missionary to be able to get some of that cross-cultural experience. I'm not going to read all these verses to you, you're welcome, but just like to share what the scripture says about the church's role in refugee resettlement, and it has a lot to say about it, as you can tell with just these 40. I'm sure there's more verses, but I will share one, Matthew 25:35. I was a stranger and you welcomed me in. And I think that just sums it up very concretely of what it is we're trying to do here. So refugee resettlement is a world missions at your doorstep, and I will stop talking and we can open it up for any questions either as a group, or you can just come up and talk to me after, however we want to do that. But my name and contact info is up here, and I have brochures along with my business card up here, and then also have an interest survey. So if you heard this and you're like, now that I know we're considering this, I think I might want to join in on that group. Then you can fill this out, and hopefully it's okay I call on her. You'll want to give that to Margot after you fill that out, so then she can kind of know from your congregation how many people you might have that are willing to kind of play a role in this co-sponsor group if this is something you do in fact pursue. So, yeah.
Awesome. Katie. Just briefly, a couple of things, and then we'll open it up for some questions. First of all, I forgot, Francis, thank you for being involved in this too, and in so many different ways, and forgive me for neglecting to thank you earlier. And that interest survey is really important that Katie was just mentioning, so that we can get a sense you're not signing up, you're signing your life away or anything like that. It's giving us a sense of who here and also online we'll find a way to get you your interest surveyed as well, but to get a sense of at least your interest and where your interests might fall. And we can then follow up with you to see how we might start coordinating that should we decide to move forward in a more robust way. So we'll have that, we'll distribute those, but for now, let me put my mask on. I'll play the Phil Donahue role here with the mic and see if you have questions. I know. Questions, comments? Francis.
Katie, in your presentation, the duration you mentioned was 6 months. Is that standard? Does it sometime go over?
That 6 months would be standard. Sometimes it's 8 months if a family's enrolled in a program called our matching grant program. Most of our families are not, because we only have a certain amount of slots and case managers to support that program. But that might make it closer to 8 months of a commitment, but generally speaking, it's 6 months.
Thank you.
Jane.
I don't think I need the mic, do I? I don't think so.
It's for
Yes?
it's also for online.
Oh, okay, for online. As a retired social studies history teacher, I've been following what's been going on in the world with refugees and migrants for a long time. and especially the situation in Afghanistan. As it unfolded, it was terrifying. What's happened to that country and to the people who have suffered for possibly centuries, not just the last 20-some years. I think it's time for All Saints and other churches to step up to the plate and help these people. We've just renewed our baptismal vows, and I think we have to think about other people. Those of us who are lucky enough to live in this community are comfortable, we're safe, we don't have to worry about someone knocking at our door with a gun, and we do have people that we can help. Amen.
Amen, Jane. Anyone else? Margie.
Not all of you know, but UCC Church, our neighbor church, is taking a family. They have housing in Douglas, which they'll use temporarily until they can find a place in Holland. So we're lucky that as we move on with this, they're right here and can give us some leadership too.
And some tips, maybe, from what they learn?
Yeah.
So, oh yeah, thank you, Jane. So we will be, should we move forward in a little bit more fulsome way, fulsome and robust, two of my favorite words, we would be likely partnering and collaborating with Grace Episcopal Church in Holland, as well as St. Francis Roman Catholic Parish, also in Holland, right? So we would not be making a commitment to go on our own, but working with them. So this, I think, that is a huge benefit to us.
Grace has been doing this.
That's right. Grace Church and St. Francis as well has done this several times before, for a while. So they also know what to expect in a way.
And they are happy to have us work with them.
Yeah.
3 is not a crowd, they said.
So yeah, I get to run.
I would just suggest that, I think the silence is that we're all in agreement. Let's just move ahead. Come to us at the annual meeting or whenever the vestry processes this, and let's take the next steps.
Do you want to say something about our meeting?
So what we'll do is the interest survey is right here, and Katie can be, or I can be distributing that. It would be super helpful to us to just get a sense of your interest. That's why it's called an interest survey. So how to sort of judge and evaluate what our resources are here in terms of people who are willing to help. So that would be really super helpful. Unless there are other questions, what I'll say is please, I'll distribute these, and you can also come up and talk with Katie. She's very generously agreed to sort of stay on and answer questions. Oh.
One question. My wife and son and I spend our time between Michigan and Chicago, and so there's not going to be that level of commitment where we're going to be here on the ground all the time. We also have full-time jobs. So
Yeah.
how would that work if we were to get involved in some capacity, but it's only like when we're here when we have availability?
I think that's totally fine. You guys could still be considered as like part of the group and still stay up to date on what's happening with the family. And then while you're here in Michigan, if there's needs that come up, I mean, you can play a role then. It's not a requirement. We have even like leaders of co-sponsor groups that go out of town and they have to designate maybe a second leader that takes that over, and can be flexible. Sure. And make that work, as long as you're in touch as a team. And if it were the group coordinator, making sure Bethany knows if there's any changes of who that point person is to be communicating needs for a family to, like, that's totally fine.
That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. My way of thinking about that is the more people we have who are willing to do at least something means that a few people don't have to do everything all the time, right? So if we have a bunch of people who are willing to do even small things, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, and who knows, maybe if you are going to be out of town most of the time, your main role is helping gather some items initially, and that's your awesome role that you play with the family. So
Awesome. So I'll distribute these. Should I do that, Katie?
Sure.
Do you think? I'll distribute these interest surveys. You can turn them into, is it okay if we said you, Margot, to, that, great. So, and then you can come on up and chat with Katie if you'd like to do that. And we're so grateful that you came. Thank you so much.
glad to be here. Glad to be
Yay.